So, and they were spinning the whole
Huh.
time.
Yeah, yeah,
So it was
yeah.
so cool. I'll see if I can find that and I'll send you that spinning one because it sounds like you will like to have one.
I love the idea of maxims and mantras and like the it's like a psychotechnology to use John's
Yeah,
language. It's like
yeah.
this little like it opens you up or focuses you or kind of breaks your thinking a little bit if you're being too rigid or too detached or something. It's and it can be it's very personal. I was actually maybe I'll ask you this now. Do you think it'd be fun for people to make their own like maxim after doing 2 hours or 2 days, I mean, of like those workshops? Because I like I had a friend that we would make maxims from, and I know people philosophically journal. Do you think like at the end of talking about we did humility once as one of ours, to like stop and say, okay, we're gonna write for 10 minutes a mantra or a maxim. Would that make it more what would that maybe do? Or is that a weird idea?
No, I think that's a great idea. Just like you said, just writing for 10 minutes, free writing,
Yeah, you've talked about that. Yeah. What's the
right?
value of that to people? And your in your meditation, I mean, not today.
Oh, well, there's a multiple possible values for it. Like
Hmm.
English teachers will encourage students to just free write on anything.
Right. What's the value besides narcissism and just ego inflation or whatever?
Or, okay, we just read this passage from this text, free write about it. So what does that mean? It's kind of like a solipsistic thing a little bit, but it's similar to circling in that, like, when you hear what someone else said and you mirror it and then you add to it, right? When you add to it, you're doing something like free speaking, like free
Mm.
writing, but it's based on what you heard, right? So usually free writing is based on some topic that is being considered,
Hmm.
right? So the topic being considered, whether you saw a little film or just heard a poem or just read an article or whatever it is, or the teacher made an argument, Anselm's argument or something like that. Free writing is, okay, you don't mirror it back first, but it's like the next step where, okay, what did that trigger in me? So it's almost like step three,
Oh yeah.
in Arthur Zion's version of Lectio Divina, where you just let whatever comes to you come to you, um, and you articulate it. So you're getting in the habit of you trying to. It's like stream of consciousness, like William James. What's your stream of consciousness? One of the exercises that we had in Gestalt therapy, which is a meditative practice, in my opinion,
Hmm.
was just keep naming anything that you're aware of. Like right now, I'm aware of you. I'm aware of my keyboard. I'm aware of the black background in Zoom. I can see the paintings behind me. I can see my face. I'm aware of the table that the laptop is on. I see this, that, that. I feel my legs, and you just go on and on and on and on. Right? Itchy underarm, blah, 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 thirsty, dry mouth, you
Yeah.
just keep naming and naming and naming and naming. Now, free writing can be just like that, or it could be you had a thought and then that thought led to another thought and you just keep writing what the thinking is. So you're
Hmm.
kind of opening up a kind of hydrant.
Hmm.
You're opening up a hydrant if you're developing thoughts, right? Like sometimes if you can't write, you have writer's block, that would be a great thing to start doing, right? Just, okay, I'm supposed to be writing about the philosophy of friendship, let's
Hmm.
just say, but I got writer's block. All right, let me just start. You could do typing or you could do writing. I like handwriting better when I'm doing free writing.
Okay.
Um, but you're just opening up the floodgates and saying any ideas that you have. So, what does that evade? It evades the editor on your shoulder, the
Hmm.
critic, right? So, you're allowing yourself to say and think anything. And normally, we have a kind of social imagination where we
Hmm.
filter and censor what we're saying and thinking. So it's uncensored. So you're able to tap into things that you might normally, without
Mm,
even
mm.
realizing it, you have blinders on that are self-censorship blinders. There's a whole bunch of different ways in which it's a creative activity.
Yeah, you're really nurturing this new like thing. You're giving some like room to breathe for this new thought almost, and or this new. I think I heard John say the other day something about like you don't want to cut off playing with a new identity too quickly because like as an adult that makes a lot of sense that you would just be like, okay, I'm done, I'm good. But sometimes there could be some like a new passion brewing, and this sounds like it could be kind of nurturing that creative um,
Yes, yeah,
newness.
it's a muscle connected with imaginal play. You can view it that way,
Okay.
like a faucet
And
that
imaginal in the way that it can be very like self-developmental or like growth oriented.
yeah, like when John talks about the distinction between imagination and the imaginal, like a kid who puts on a cape and picks up a stick and starts acting like he's Zorro, right? He's doing something imaginal. He doesn't have images necessarily of Zorro in his head,
Hmm.
but he's enacting being Zorro, right? So he's simulating Zorro somehow or another. He's taking that on. It's a similar set of muscles when you just allow, normally, look, normally what we allow ourselves to think are thoughts that our social filters allow,
Hmm.
right? Some people who don't, you say that guy doesn't have a filter. He's just like some comedians will talk and they'll say stuff that nobody else says
Hmm.
because they're purposely removing the social filter, but they'll say things that make you think provocatively about things that, like everyday mundane things,
Hmm.
sexuality, going to the bathroom, whatever the humor is. But so normally there's all these filters on us. So free writing can be one way of just opening up all the filters and seeing what's there. Well, what do psychedelics do? Psychedelics open up the filters, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
They break frame, as John would say, right? So
Yeah, but it's
normally,
like it's towards virtue though. That's what's more interesting even than the psychedelic example. Because like writing after you've been talking about courage or sophron.
right, especially if it's topical, like I said, right?
Hmm.
Some teacher, like an English teacher, might want you to write about what they just read, right? And then she'll go over and see some students just sitting there not writing anything. And she, why aren't you writing? I can't think, nothing's coming to me about that. And then, so she'll say, well, then just start writing anything that you think about anything. Just
Hmm.
start writing. And sometimes it's like, okay, jump into the pool, wet your feet,
Hmm.
open the door, get involved.
Yeah, and the sensor is really like a fast acting system a lot of times too, right? Because if you're like, if you imagine guiding your hands across a cliff, you want your like critical brain to be quick at the nose. If you're like, oh, I'm gonna reach, no, 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 you want it to shut you down when you're wrong. If it's this kind of like loop that shuts you down, but then
Right. So
this,
that's why it's like play,
hmm,
because it's safe. You don't have to worry about what might come out. You're the only one who's going to read it. It's like journal writing,
hmm.
right? But it's really interesting to do it and then go back and read what you wrote.
Is it fair as a like because you're a philosophy teacher that like maybe you're trying to encourage your students to play with philosophy when you're working with them in class or demonstrating something?
Yeah. Yeah. You want to get them, a lot of it, one of the benefits of free writing is just to get people over their fear of speaking at all or
Mm.
writing at all. They don't have confidence, you know.
It's intimidating. I know people when I try to talk to them about this stuff, and I just get so I take for granted how much I know sometimes. They go, "Oh, that reminds me of this," and I want to share that, and like I don't even realize they're getting overwhelmed and overloaded by the technicality. But the joy of philosophy is what I was trying to share, and this free writing thing. This it's really interesting how maybe I'll also another thing that I've been interested in that maybe you could talk about is like how do philosophers teach too much? Do you ever think of people like when I read Heidegger, for example, sometimes I feel like I just wish he would have given me 5 paragraphs instead of a book. Like, how do you see students overloaded by that, or do you feel like how do people deal with that well?
Yeah, it's really hard to balance the the instructor or the professor's value system about how much content they're obligated to make sure their students know coming out of
Mm.
a course on, let's just say, ancient philosophy. All right, so that's something I haven't taught in a while, and I taught it recently, and that's how I found John because I was boning up on the pre-Socratics or something, and I was searching to just kind of remember who said what. Was it Anaxagoras or was it Anaximenes? I get the
Uh-huh.
name. So let me just listen to a couple of these. I like to listen to YouTubes when I'm running.
Hmm.
I did double duty. And that's how I found John. But so I recently had to teach that course. I hadn't taught the course at all in a few years, and I had never taught it online. So, and I've been teaching. I taught this one. It was going to be completely asynchronous, so it was all about their reading and writing. So it's like, okay, how much do they have to learn? I don't want, and this is this thing where wiser teachers than me, or me in my wiser moments, will say it's better to do less so that they go deeper, so they can
Hmm.
really sink their teeth into something philosophical, right? But then, so ancient philosophy is really a history class. It's like a survey of a whole period.
Hmm.
And we teach it where it's not just the Greeks. For the longest time, ancient philosophy taught in the Western world would be only about, Socrates et al.
Hmm.
But now we do Asia too, you know,
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, Confucianism. That's a lot.
Hmm.
We got to do, the Greeks and, the Indians basically, and the Chinese, Greece, India, China, and Rome, So that's a lot of content. And I tried to I had to do this curating. All right, who are the most important Greeks? I need some pre-Socratics. I certainly need Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. I need some, well, what are they called? Stoics, Epicureans, skeptics, and the cynics. At least a couple, if not one or two, in all of those categories. Those are the major categories in Greek philosophy.
These are all my favorite people.
Yeah, and then I've got to do, Lao Tzu, Buddha, and a couple of the Indian guys, the, there's six orthodox schools of Hinduism, Vedanta, yoga, Samkhya, all this side. At least, at least introduce them to that. And,
That's awesome. Yeah.
and I've got to do the major unorthodox schools in India, the Jainism, Charvaka, the materialists, and is that Buddhism? Yeah, Jain. Yeah, that's it. And then Lao Tzu,
Any Sikhs?
oh, the Sikhs, yeah, but they came later, right?
Yeah.
But I did throw them in. I did a little, like a half a PowerPoint slide on them, only because why not?
They're really interesting. They're a very developed modern religion. Like,
Yeah, and they're not from the ancient period, but that's okay. And I even did a little Christianity and Neoplatonism. Yeah,
hmm,
Neoplatonism and Christianity because of John,
that's
and
awesome.
and yeah, and then Taoism versus Confucianism. So that was a lot of content to cover in a
Hmm.
12-week semester, right? But I did it. So, and whenever I do that, I feel like, oh, it's just, they're not going to really get a good feel for any philosophy because they're not going to be able to go deep enough with any of it. But I
Well,
tried
it'd be
to
cool if it was applied and to history, because like you're right, you need the history part. And in fact, like I was thinking the other day, I just love that there were historians, and the fact that someone would write down what the philosophers were doing is through historians. And a lot of philosophers are responding to historical philosophies anyways, or religions anyways. So the
yeah.
history part is kind of vital. But then, like you're saying, if you just have the facts of things, the whole point of philosophy is to do philosophy. So you need to have
So I
that
try to do
lived.
both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I try to do both.
That's awesome.
And
Yeah.
but I've had other classes where I purposely only do like 6 articles the entire semester. one every 2 weeks. So that we have
Hmm.
2 weeks to delve into
Yeah,
Plato's
yeah.
Euthyphro, let's just say. I don't know if you ever read the Euthyphro
No,
dialogue.
not yet. I'm working. There's as many hours of reading in Plato as there's the Old Testament. So I'm like marching my way through a book or two a week right now. Uh,
Yeah, so
but no.
I like those classes. I like those classes better.
Hmm.
But I love both of them really, but I do feel like when I'm teaching on campus and I have to cover a lot, it's that I experience the feeling of this is going by too fast.
Oh yeah, because there's so much to cover and it's so technical too. Like,
Yeah, so it depends on the course. So if it's like
mhm.
intro to philosophy, I have to do a little bit of metaphysics, a little bit of epistemology, a little bit of values, axiology or ethics or whatever, a
Mhm.
little bit of logic. They have to learn what arguments are. Like there's a few things that I have to do, but I could spend as much time as I want on any of them because it's just an intro class. They have to
Mhm.
learn the three major fields: epistemology, metaphysics, axiology. They have to learn a little bit of logic. They have to know what arguments are, and
There's a
then
lot more flexibility there.
some representative philosophical problems like free will, God's existence, whatever, right?
I would love to hear you talk for an hour on free will in the middle of a philosophy class. That must be stellar.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the students, like that's a subtle problem.
What's
A
that?
lot of them, when they get it, they're really confused by it. Like it's a real puzzle.
What do you mean?
The free will puzzle. All
Oh,
right, let me give you,
you could
we'll
please
spend a few minutes on it, just a few.
bless you.
Uh, Um, so here's like the skeptic's argument, the free will skeptic, the denier of free will. Well, let's just call him the skeptic, the free
Okay.
will skeptic. Premise one: either all of our actions or choices are deterministically caused or they're not, right? So either determinism or indeterminism governs human action.
Mhm. And
So
determinism means outside forces, right?
determinism is an abstraction from the laws of nature that says that everything above the quantum level, maybe that quantum phenomena are indeterminate, but even if they are, that indeterminacy, some will argue, never bubbles up beyond the quantum level. By the time you reach the level of atoms, electrons, even, you know, a molecule certainly, or human brains, it's all deterministic. So
Mhm.
Newtonian mechanism, A causes B. If A causes B, A always causes B.
And me noticing the moment is like my own stupidity that evolution baked in to trick my atoms or something.
Say that
How
again.
how does your awareness fit in when you're just like anything above that is all
Oh, yeah, yeah.
predetermined?
So, right. So, like many of the people who would make the argument that we are in a deterministic universe, everything in the world that we inhabit, right? They will argue that, like, they'll be reductive physicalists. John is a non-reductive physicalist.
Mhm.
So
What's the
John
difference?
says,
Mm.
yeah, the difference is mind is an emergent property. Consciousness is an emergent property.
Mm.
It's a new kind of property.
That's what Greg Henriquez says too. Yeah.
Yeah, and well, that other guy, the analytic idealist, I forgot his
Oh,
name.
Capstrip.
Kastrup, yes.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Bernardo. Yeah.
yeah, he says no, it's not emergent. Everything is mind, right? So that's almost like that Buddhist guy saying, no, no, it's already everything. You're already Sophrosid. You
That's
lose that.
panpsychism. Is a It's a
Yeah, it's
form of
like
that, right?
panpsychism or idealistic monism. Like all there is
Mm.
mind, right? So, but that, you don't have to be one of those people. Um, for this argument, it's like the hard-nosed physicalist scientist is a reductionist. So he says that mind really just reduces to brain. So mental states are epiphenomena. They have no causal powers. They're like shadows, well, You see the shadow behind me? The
Hmm.
shadow isn't has no causal power whatsoever,
Yeah.
right? So the brain is like the hand that casts the shadow. The shadow has no power at all. So it's an evolutionary appendix phenomenon. It doesn't do it. It's epiphenomenalism,
Hmm.
right? The mind has no causal powers whatsoever. Only the brain does. And evolution, right, explains why our brains are complex. And our organisms are complex, but that's like so like psychology or sociology reduces to individual minds, which reduce to brains, which are more real. And the lower you go, the more real everything is, right? Brains are parts of organisms. Organisms have organic chemistry, which reduces to chemistry. So, like all the neural firings, that's just chemistry. It's just
Hmm.
complex levels of chemistry, right? So, anything that seems emergent and new and has novel abilities or causal powers, the reductionist says no, all the power is at the bottom level, the level of Newtonian physics or quantum physics, but that doesn't bubble up. It doesn't bubble up. So, everything at the level we're made out of atoms,
Right.
everything that we're made out of obeys the same laws that billiard balls do. When you hit one at a certain angle and it hits the other one at a certain angle, the second one's going to move in the direction that Newton's laws would predict,
Hmm.
right? And your neurons are just complicated versions of those billiard balls, right? And they create, these impressions that are like shadows in the mind, but
Hmm.
it's all evolutionary complexity, right? So, but determinism is the doctrine that every event has a cause. Every event has a cause
Hmm.
above the quantum level, right? We're above the quantum level. So
And the
the same
causes are
law that
final.
the same pardon?
The causes are final. They're the only, all the causes are outside the person.
Right, right. Well, the causes of everything that work through us originated in the Big Bang,
Hmm.
and given the laws of nature, A causes B, B causes C. The Big Bang caused every word coming out of our mouths right now.
Hmm. And that's like the wrong version of like Parmenides, right? Like, isn't that saying like all motion is causal and I'm not, all motion preceded my choice or something like that? It's a very um motion itself I can't explain, but I know it's not me doing any of it or something like that. There's a very weird Greek argument that loses the self in the explanation of motion.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that interpretation of this of Parmenides, but the part of it that I do understand is that yes, because all of my deliberating, struggling with my desires, right? That self-control
The
thing.
Sopherson, right? Yeah.
Yeah, all of that, it's all just it's the same laws that explain the movement of the planets
Hmm.
and the electrons spinning around in an atom. Those are all lawful, necessitated, determined. Every state is determined lawfully by the previous state of every entity and thing and every state of the universe.
Hmm.
So, like the state of the universe at time t0, the beginning, Big Bang, determined the state at time 1 in accordance with the laws of nature, which
Hmm.
determined the state at time 2, all the way up to now, right? And into the future. So,
Right.
according to this view, given the initial conditions of a system, only one possible state, only one state is possible for the next state and then the next one. And so there's only one possible
Oh,
history.
wow. Okay. So they don't allow for like any qualitative shifts to occur in the continuum of time. Like what I mean by that is because you said initial conditions, like because in other dynamic systems theory, initial conditions still matter a lot. You want to know them because that's really powerful knowledge. But all of those can, like, to use John's language, they can become a self-organizing criticality that pushes beyond kind of like the physics of that time space into a new qualitative reality where you have to throw out those other conditions in
Yeah,
a
that's
sense.
emergence. That's
Right.
emergence. And
Yeah.
I believe that emergence makes sense and that it's probably true. Um, but The determinist doesn't.
Right, the reductive
The reductive
physicalist.
physicalist
Yeah.
determinist doesn't.
Yeah,
It's
because
like,
John believes in the physical universe, but then he believes in that plus
right. So he's
without losing that
non-reductive.
causal
That's why
level.
he's
Mhm.
non-reductive. He's a non-reductive physicalist.
Yeah, I think I
But
agree with that.
he's an emergentist. Yeah, I side with John too on that. But so for the sake of the free
Yeah, this
will
is great.
argument,
Yeah.
for the sake of the free will argument, the traditional argument was usually just about determinism, right? Like every event has a cause, and causation is logical. Sorry, nomological. It's lawful, right? If an A type event causes a B type event, then whenever there's an A type event, there will be a B type event following it immediately,
Hmm.
right? This is necessitated causation. So there's only going to be one history of the universe. If you could rewind the whole universe back to the initial condition,
Hmm.
like a DVD, and then
Hmm.
press the play button, you'd see the same film over and over again every time you rewound it
Is it
because of
unscientific to try and test for that? Is that like a question we just can't answer?
well, you might argue that that is unfalsifiable
Right,
because
that's what I was saying. I should
yeah, we
better,
can't
much better
rewind
word.
the
Yeah.
universe. We can't rewind the universe, but
Right.
we
So,
can do the universe is microcosmic experiments writ large, so we can try to replicate systems and what their initial conditions are, but but the
hmm.
determinists will say, look, take a chess game, a program, right? Um, and let it play against another chess program, right? And they're both in the computer. You turn the computer on, you hit the play button, and these two
Hmm.
programs play against each other,
Hmm.
right? An exact sequence of moves is going to happen based on the algorithms that have been programmed into each program, right? Okay, no matter how the game ends, or you stop it at a certain time and it hasn't ended, whatever. So
Hmm.
maybe
Yeah.
there was 85 moves or whatever, and this is what they were. Now you shut it off. There's no AI that can read what happened and learn from it, right? So you shut the program off and it has no memory. It's written out of it that it can't
Hmm.
do that, unlike
Right. This like linear symbol system is just restarted. You're just
yeah, and
okay.
then it's going to play the exact same game
Hmm.
every single time.
Hmm.
Both programs will make the same moves that they made. That's deterministic. So determinism is the view that everything in nature is that way.
Hmm. How do they deal with like the fact that we have incomplete information and that we're always acting with incomplete
Yeah,
information?
what they will say is that that's an epistemic problem, not a metaphysical problem.
Oh,
So yeah, so
so they
just
just kind
like,
of walk out of the way, but they don't answer it.
well, I don't know if it's a dodge or not. I
Well,
mean, there do
mm,
seem to be indeterministic things going on in the world, right? So it could be just a dodge. And also, the claim that quantum effects, quantum indeterminacy is so vanishingly small that it can never bubble up above the quantum level to the atomic level or the molecular level or the galactic level, right? That could be a bluff, right? Because chaos theory suggests that, the slightest little change in a system over here can snowball. The word snowball, snowball rolling
mm,
down the hill gets bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Or just like the butterfly effect, right? So tiny little things can have drastic impacts in the right kind of system, particularly in a dynamical self-organizing system, right?
mm.
So if if quantum phenomena are occurring in our brain cells and our brains have evolved to be the most complex thing in the universe, John jokingly says, no, they're not, because the brain plus anything else is more complex, right? That's a good one. But we all know what that
He was
means.
just poking fun at the people saying that, like
Yeah,
as an extreme statement, though.
yeah, we know what it means. But I think that's a bluff, um, you know, that indeterminacy can't rise up. I think that's a mistake.
Well, I
But
think in comparative senses too, though, like a being with a memory, when you take like you were saying with that program, if you take a worm, you can actually train, or mice or things like that, you can train them to where you can notice the neurological changes. They've learned a
yeah,
space, but then you can carterize their brains and then they're reset. So there's like learning has a whole weird wrinkle in the deterministic model.
Yeah, I agree.
And you can
it's
learn volitionally. You can be like, I don't want to learn, or I value learning. So there's this whole volitional element
Yeah.
in
Plus, what's
memory.
questionable, I mean, it's useful as a conceptual tool, the idea of rewinding the universe, but reverse causation might not be possible.
Well, that's a good dynamic theory point too, because there's definitely changes that are not one to one forward to back. They're just one directional, right? Once I chop my leg off, there's no regrowing my leg. I'm
Exactly.
totally for the rest of my existence,
Right.
a one-legged being.
Yeah, it's a weird idea of us, if we could literally turn time in reverse, where I
Hmm.
wind up back in my mother's womb as a
Well, it's
fetus.
good thinking to be able to rewind
Yeah,
events. Yeah, yeah,
conceptually
yeah.
we can do it, but that doesn't mean it's actually physically possible. But in any event, we're going way too far into this. So I wanted to give you the skeptic's argument.
Oh, that's
So
excellent though. Yeah.
premise one, either determinism is true or false of everything,
Mhm.
right? So which means either determinism or indeterminism is true, right? Either everything is caused necessarily, deterministically, or some things aren't, right? One or the other has to be true because
Mhm.
it's a dichotomy, right? Second premise, if determinism is true, then the causes of your behavior predate your existence. So you're not the author or the agent of them.
Mhm.
You're just a funnel through which Big Bang causes are unfolding. You have absolutely no control over it.
Mhm.
You're not the author. So therefore, you don't have free will. Third premise, if indeterminism is true, then phenomena like choices are purely random events.
Oh, yeah, that random is a tricky one too, right?
Yeah, yeah, like a coin toss. But that's only epistemically random because the physics of it do determine whether it's going to be heads or tails. But epistemically, we don't know which one it is, right? So we
Mhm.
treat it as if it's metaphysically random, right? But if things really are metaphysically random, then they're like our epistemic understanding of the coin toss, right? In other words, we can't control the outcome of a random process,
Mhm.
in which case we are not the author in charge of what we do, in which case we have no free will. Like the choice that came to me, it's like an epileptic seizure that just happened.
Randomness, yeah, we talked about this last time.
And it
Yeah.
spit out a certain, yeah, and then the conclusion is, therefore, that either way, there's no free will. So, quick summary: either determinism is true or false. Premise one. Premise two: if determinism is true, the Big Bang caused your choice, not you. Therefore, you have no free will. Premise three: if indeterminism is true, your choice was purely random. You can't control a random event. You're not the author of it. It wasn't up to you. Therefore, you have no free will. Conclusion: either way, whether determinism is true or false, you have no free will. And
Mhm.
that's the standard skeptical argument against free will.
That's
So when
excellent. No, no, I get, because the randomness is something that's really a modern idea, especially the value of randomness. Like you said, like with phenomenon, we can describe them religiously and attribute them really weird patterns to phenomenon and say, oh, that was, you know, it wasn't bad weather that stopped Genghis Khan from getting to Japan. It was actually like a deity that wiped all his ships away. Or like you said, it's just randomness wiping away everything. Um, and but there is arbitrariness is a weird philosophical concept, I'll bet, to dig into.
Yeah, I don't remember which of my professors made this clear to me. I think, oh, yeah, it was my mentor, Andy Wengraff, and he's still my mentor. He was one of my first philosophy teachers who said arbitrary is like what you said, it's a tricky philosophical concept. It doesn't mean totally random because, look, three strikes and you're out in baseball. There's three strikes, right? And you're out. And then there's three outs, and that's the end of your half of the inning, right?
Mhm.
In baseball. And there's nine innings, unless it's a tie, and then it goes into over, whatever that's called.
Yeah.
I always forget that. It's not overkill.
Saying it's just
Whatever.
extra innings.
Yeah, extra innings, right?
I want to start saying overkill though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something death or something. I
Oh,
forget what it's
sudden death. Yeah, yeah, that's
sudden
another one.
death. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I knew it had something to do with dying. Um, she said, but like, so the number three, it could have been four, it could have been two. It's arbitrary, right? But it couldn't have been 100 million strikes and you're out because then we could have never played a single inning in a
Mm.
lifetime, right? So there are constraints around arbitrary
That's
phenomena.
what is that called? That's emanation or something? Like that's not exactly like responding to emergence, but you're just saying like there's an intelligible thing that we're forgetting we're in or
Yeah,
something.
I think that's more associated with emanation than with was transcendence is the other direction, right?
I don't know the emergence, emanation, transcendence. Those three kind of
Yeah,
confuse me a
these are
lot, but
Neoplatonic terms. And like that whole framework is sort of, like I said before, it's relatively new to me. But I think the way that somebody like John might describe it is that you have affordances and constraints, right? So constraints limit what you could do, but they
mhm.
also afford um, a
There's a
space.
functional reason that they're nine endings. It's not just a constraint
Yeah,
that's
because for
punishing
the
you or
pragmatics of being a human in time, right? And with
yeah.
our biological, our biorhythms, we tend to sleep every night when, this is a mammalian thing, or some people work the late night shift, but, our biorhythms suggest that we sleep when it's dark and what, so there are limits on our ordinary activities and sports serve a certain function. And so there are pragmatic constraints that limit how much time it's reasonable to spend playing a sport in a
Hmm.
day. Right? And so given those kinds of constraints, yes, it could have been two strikes and you're out, or one strike and you're out, or even five strikes and you're out, but 100 strikes and you're out. That game would take 3 days,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
kind of.
yeah. Human behavior is not just arbitrary. Yeah, it's not just like
Right.
even the
Right. So our
games.
our
Yeah, that's great.
biological and psychological and sociological and ecological and environmental constraints make a range of arbitrary behavior reasonable.
Hmm.
And then outside that range, it's no longer. So that's not arbitrary where that range is.
Mm.
But within the range, it's somewhat arbitrary.
And that's true too when you're kind of like just doing correlational decision making. Like when I'm hungry, if I was too specific, I could starve, right? If I only wanted like Pringles potato chips, I might drive around for 3 hours, not find them, and be hungrier. So I want to have a goal, but I don't want to be so rigid with the goal. Like it's, and that's subtle to think about, right? Because you don't really, you just think I want Pringles, but you would actually stop if you saw a hot dog and just change your mind real quick because you have a much fuzzier. Do you remember any of those books from like the 80s and 90s on like fuzzy logic and that kind of stuff? And like they're not trendy now or popular, but they do kind of gel with some of the chaos theory stuff we're talking about. Um, and again, now we're back in this almost like it's hard to do scientific research on, so it's easy to for like a opponent of this theory to just write off what we're saying as like woo woo, right? Rick's fuzzy logic, fuzzy meditation logic, really, you know.
Yeah. So what started the whole free will thing was me saying we were talking about teaching
Yeah,
and
I'm just curious about the topic, and you're an expert. That's the reason I was asking
yeah,
you to
no,
bring
I'm
it up.
remembering our footsteps, my crumbs of memory was teaching too much, like Heidegger.
Oh,
We
you're
should do
right. Yeah.
5 paragraphs, and then I mentioned my ancient philosophy class and all the stuff, and then my intro class where I have to cover a certain number of things like metaphysics, epistemology, and then some sample problems like free will, and then that's when I said, you know, sometimes when my students get it, that's why we want to go slower so they really get in the grip of a philosophical problem, right? When you can go
Hmm.
deep into it. Um, it confuses the hell out of them if they really get that one skeptical argument that I just gave. And there's lots of different arguments about free will. That's like one of the main ones. Um, that's confusing,
Well,
you know.
yeah, and it's tough because back to Philosophia and IKEA, like your interlocutors are not really giving you goodwill. They're not really entertaining you the way you're maybe entertaining them. Or when they do, that's the most interesting, right? Do you have like fun sparring opponents? Like I know artists like Picasso and I forget the other artists, but they would kind of be enemies that were famous enemies and go, "Ooh, you're doing that with red. I'm gonna do orange." Do you have people that you kind of have fun, playful um, sparring about free will with?
Oh yeah, because especially most analytic philosophers don't believe that we have free will.
Hmm.
So, and I do, and I argue for it. And so I argue against that skeptical argument that
Oh,
we
and you
just
consider yourself analytic. You're coming from within the
my
tradition.
training as a
That's
philosopher is in
true.
analytic philosophy. Yeah, the CUNY grad school where I got my
Yeah,
PhD,
you told me. Yeah.
and even my undergrad department at Brooklyn College, and you know, almost all analytic philosophers. Even the ones who were doing ethics and things like that were doing it through an analytic lens.
Hmm.
Um, so that's where my training is. But I'm interested in things that are not analytic. So,
Well, deductive logic is so powerful, right? Like as a tool, it's and especially it runs kind of our economy and our political realm. If you can come up with a good business idea and justify it, or a good political idea and justify it, you can go into a new country or start a new company with stocks. Like the ability to be analytical and state 45 propositions that lead to like you should invest in me or we should do this new law. They don't go like, where's the ambiguity? Let's hold the tension or anything like that.
yeah. Yeah, that's a funny like way of feeling for me being pulled in two different directions because what you mentioned about branding, the car had five brands on the bumper
Yeah.
stickers or something like that. Like we're all being called upon in our public roles, I suppose. When I say we all, I mean professional academics to occupy a certain kind of philosophical niche. And it's almost like we're branded, right? I'm an analytic philosopher, but I also and I have certain niche categories that I write on, like Buddhism, meditation, free will. There's a bunch of things that I work my little domain, right? Um, but even maybe a better example, but like so you want to be like what you just said, where I want to be able to lay out 15 propositions and say now invest in my company, you know, what you just said. I want to be somebody who's advocating very persuasively for the views that I'm defending, but I'm also by nature, because of my meditative history and my personal growth and developmental history and my attraction to things like circling and whatnot, I'm more like Krishnamurti in terms of being open minded, that Jane non one sidedness thing. Like, I'm always willing to entertain the ways in which I could be wrong.
Hmm.
And, like, as a meditation teacher, that's what I said, that might be the better example. Like, I've been teaching meditation for decades and teaching yoga and all that. Like most people, when they go to a meditation teacher, they're expecting and hoping that they're finding a guru who's going to tell them this is how you should do it and this is why and here's the metaphysics and here's the whole framework, the conceptual. Like I'm a blankist or I'm a Jain or I'm a Buddhist or I'm in the Tibetan, Ningpa, whatever lineage, or what was the one the Zen one that you mentioned before?
Oh, the Shin Buddhism.
Yeah, whatever, right? I'm in this lineage, and like, or I'm a Vipassana teacher, so I'm going to give you this is our philosophy, and this is the way it's done, and but I'm like so eclectic and open-minded that I
Hmm.
can almost never feel comfortable occupying that kind of position. It's like Krishnamurti. Feels it doesn't fit me. It would be dishonest of me to speak like an authority about something. So like because of that, like if I didn't have that problem, I'd probably like be a guru already or something with all the knowledge and techniques and practices that I've cultivated over the course of my lifetime.
Yeah,
You know what
you
I
can
mean?
still do it. There's still time.
No, I don't want to do
I
that.
know.
Yeah.
I love you, Rick. You're the best.
Thank you. Um, no, but like I have friends in the spiritual world who put themselves out there like, this is my seven-pointed system, and this kind
Mhm.
of, and I appreciate those things, and it's good to have a method and have a map and all that kind of, but like I said at the very beginning of our discussion, I'm more kind of classic,
It's tough because there's kind of two ways to go about spirituality, or three. I guess you just unconsciously never decide. But you can really home yourself in a tradition and let it be the walls, or you can be just kind of constantly learning. And I think John's like that. I think Carl Jung. Most people that impacted history really are like, not, they're always stepping beyond the tradition. Even Moses, we talked about Moses a while ago. Like, he did
yeah.
more than the previous Israelites did in his thinking. And so, and I think both are great. I kind of try to do both because I try to value a tradition as this kind of sacred house, and this,
Yeah, I
hey, can you let
respect
me
it.
in your temple? Let me in here. But then also, like you, like, I'm very open and curious, and um, as I get older, I'm trying to not let my ideas show up first. I want to, like, try the thing out before I smother it with my opinion, but I still, like, have both. Um, and I could see myself joining a tradition, but it would have to be like, I just thought it was so superior to all the others, and that was like a quicker way. Like those monks that are going down this 100-mile runs, there's some transformation happening there, and like they had to really push their chips in to probably commit to something like that in a way that I would struggle to do.
I like
Um,
that metaphor. Push the chips in. Yeah.
it is, though, because if I don't know, I was listening to Matt Segall. I don't know if you know him. I'm probably mispronouncing his last name. He's into Evan's work. I know Evan Thompson's work, and he talks about Whitehead a lot. He's at the Integral Institute, I think, if you know them at all.
I know of them.
Okay, yeah, of the so, but Whitehead is saying, like, prehension is the noticing of the felt experience. And so it's like, okay, people are all prehensive, they're all noticing experience, but then, like, the religion part is putting a label on top, or a kind of a shell to it, or a veneer. um, and then it's like, okay, it's tough because you're kind of in this existential place where you just want to constantly be in touch with experience. And it's hard to do both, like commit to a tradition and keep noticing experience as experience. um,
Yeah. I don't know if it's just my personality or, my life trajectory and things like when I was a teenage mystic living a monastic life, I said this to John I think on our first or second interview.
mhm.
I was like one of Jesus's disciples, I mean, I was 100%. I drank the Kool-Aid in that group. I had three, spiritual teachers. They were like a trinity. And for years in my life, that was the way.
Hmm.
But it itself was an eclectic way because it was a blend of things. It was kind of like theosophy, where, Buddhism, Hinduism, this, that, the other thing, it's all part of a kind of mystical path. And meditation
Hmm.
is the primary way through that path, and blah, blah, blah. And it was working for me and everything. But then, like, that shattered for me. And particularly when my three teachers separated, I was being pressured by one of them, only one of them, to decide which of the three of them that I was going to
Hmm.
follow. And ever since then, I became allergic to this idea that you need to be committed to a teacher. um, that I don't know if I can attribute this
Well, and that's
kind.
always true. And I mean, even like Christians have to deal with finding a good pastor and finding a good. I think that's, Christianity is established, so it's really nice that if you're just into that, you can go to 5 churches in your area and hopefully find one that gels with. I love the architecture, or I love the talking, or I love the,
Yeah,
I don't like dishonest people, and I was feeling like this place was dishonest. Um,
yeah.
but
Paul
the, yeah.
Vanderklay. Paul Vanderklay,
Oh yeah, he's awesome.
he saw my interview with John
I've seen him talk about some of yours. Yeah, yeah.
and talked about this container thing, that Christianity has a container, and that
Hmm.
poor Repetti, when his little church broke up, he didn't have the container like we have, us Christians. We've got the church. You can go to another
Yeah,
church.
he
You can
way
go to any.
oversimplified things. I remember when you're talking about it.
Pardon?
I think he way oversimplified things when he was
Oh
saying that, and
yeah,
I
yeah. I
remember what
had a
you were talking
discussion
about.
with John about that,
Oh
saying
yeah,
what I thought about it, and that was in my, I think, in my last interview with John. We talked a little bit about ways in which Paul and John's understanding did and didn't match up.
right, right, right. Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if you saw the third interview I had with John, but
I'm
we
not
talked.
remembering it right now, but
Yeah,
I've definitely seen
yeah,
all the ones you've done with him.
yeah. We talked about that, and then John hooked me up with Paul, and we're about to make a date for me to be on one of Paul's
Oh, that's
things.
awesome. That'll be really good.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. But yeah,
Yeah, because again, like exactly what happened to you happens to churches, happens to Christian churches, and they fall apart, and they have it's a lot. It's not. I can't even say it's a lot harder, but like you hope that a big organization like that would have enough safety valves that keep things like kind of consistent and in line and keep it like that sweet container that he's talking about. But still, like any local church is just that, especially like, I don't know, I think it's kind of exciting. You ever like see like a new pastor and like go like, oh, what are they into? Like, how's their church like? Or a new there's a Jewish synagogue not far from me, and I was looking at their website and they had like a new kind of head pastor, and you could tell this one individual was having a lot of ripple and influence on the way things were working. And so everything is still way more unique than it's this was good and that was bad.
yeah. Well, if you have a teacher, a pastor, a rabbi, a swami, a guru, it doesn't matter who it is,
Right.
who's really connected, you know, with
Mm.
they're aligned with their spiritual growth in the right way, that makes all the difference in the world. You know, it's kind of like, I think John made this. I'm making an analogy. I don't remember what he was talking about, but when he said, "Oh yeah, I think we were talking about philosophical counseling," when he was saying like some psychologists, he was imagining philosophical counseling is deeper. It's more like dialogos and whatnot. And he said like some psychologists, like when you go and you do some work with a psychologist, you get the feeling like they're just doing a script
Hmm.
of what psychologists are like. I hear you. How does that feel?
Well,
And
psychiatry is that. It's just check boxes.
yeah, yeah, psychiatry,
You're
totally.
depressed, check. Oh, you're this kind of depression, check, check, check. And then yeah, you
Right.
can get
And
scripted
then
and
what medicines you need, and that's the
right.
deterministic model.
Hmm.
But so yeah, so I would imagine that, you know, some yoga teachers, some meditation teachers, some gurus, some pastors, some
Hmm.
ministers, priests, whatever, it's formulaic for them too, you know?
Yeah,
And then
especially like it's you're in such a weird place as a priest, right? Because no one's pushing back on you, and if you start getting into something and it kind of you see it catching on, then you just think it's true, and um, authority puts you in a weird place um, as a person. Because I teach, and I'm sure I'm way more boring and automatic than I was when I was like my third year. Because I'm like, I got this. I don't need to be creative anymore. I don't need to size up people. I've kind of figured out what my crowd is, um, and it's tough, right? Like that's kind of what the brain wants to do. It wants to get really good at things, automate it, and ignore it. That's like the functional brain. Um,
yeah, you know, when you said that, I remembered my very first semester of teaching in
mm,
college. I was on fire just because I so loved being there in
yeah, that's awesome.
front of the class, bringing up thought experiments and whatnot, and being able to conduct the whole thing.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I'll never forget how, and I'm not as alive as a teacher now as I was then, but I still, you know, if I'm not rushing through things that I have to cover because
Hmm.
we're falling behind on the schedule. I got to zip through. I'm sorry, we're gonna have to zip through Socrates today. You know,
Of course.
But when I have the time, then it's just as I the spirit comes over me, and you have
Hmm.
like some teachers who are like they're really in the zone. Some pastors are really in the zone. It depends on the individual, and where they're at. But
Well, back to what you were saying too about being automatic. Like once you've had a bunch of good thoughts, that's the problem. And if you're still willing to like undermine your good thoughts and play with new ideas and get what I do to combat being automatic as a teacher is I get really excited about this class that's coming up and I go, "Oh, I don't know them, I don't know him or her or and you just kind of get and then you go, okay, well, what do I want to how do I want to help them? What do I want to, and then it kind of reconnects you to your passion. Um, but yeah, like you said, as soon as you start getting busy, oh, let's just breeze by Socrates. They can get something that replaces him. Like there's no, yeah,
yeah, the first couple of days of a new class are always fun for me,
that's
trying to
awesome.
get a read on the people, right? And how am I affecting them and who's awake
Mm.
and what's working. Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
Oh, and you've even measured their openness. You've measured how much they've gotten open to new ideas.
Oh,
Like
that's right. I
that's a
forgot
value
about
of
that.
yours.
Yes, I have done that. Yeah. I have to dig up that research. I I've mentioned it, I've referred to it in a number of different things that I've written, but the actual study, I never published it
Hmm.
because it's kind of like a scientific study,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
research.
You have
And
time and decisions and all that stuff,
yeah,
measurements.
all that kind of, and I don't know how to do that kind of work. I mean, I did the work, but I didn't know how to write it up the way people write up scientific papers.
Well, it's like,
Uh,
what do you want to say? Yeah, and like you have to pick a conference or something you aim at, and then start to kind of copy their formatting or do something that they would read
Yeah,
or.
and what happened was, so I
Mm.
kept trying to publish it, and I would submit it and get feedback, and kept changing it, and adding what was missing and whatnot. And after a while, I was like, I need to get some publications
Yeah, yeah,
right
yeah.
away. I'm not going to get tenure, so I put that on the back shelf and never published it. But I've referred to my findings, and how I set up like the way I explained it to you. Let's just say whenever we talked about it, I'll say, "Oh, I did this study. This is how I did it." But it's like not formal. It's in some other thing that I'm writing, where I happen to mention it. So I know I've referred to the study here and there, but I never. So I keep John asked me, "Oh, I'd love to read that study," and I thought I had it, and then I realized I never published it. I've
I
only
remember.
made mention of it a few times, and I went looking. I was like, "No, I never published that damn thing." So I now have to find where my latest version of it is in my mountain of files, and I could probably get that published now. Because
Yeah, yeah, it's cool data and showing that kind of stuff. At the very least, it leads to kind of cumulative effects of research. Just having that study exist in a database somewhere um, is kind of cool.
yeah, I have to get it published. Um, it'll
That's,
happen.
well, you're already tenured and everything, so this is just
Yeah,
all.
I don't need publications, but I keep writing because I have a lot to say. And
Yeah, which is very admirable. I think it's cool. Like again, like you're a giver. You like life and you're into what you do and you like have second order joy for your decisions and your general environment and stuff. So I think it's tough as a researcher too. You have all the responsibilities and all of the grading and you know, you have no reward for publishing this stuff.
yeah, well, the rewards are just psychosocial, I suppose.
Yeah. Do you
Contributing to,
want like having finished your book, because you said you finished your book on Tuesday, all the final submissions. Is there like a research thing that you would love to see followed up or a chapter that you're really excited about now that it's kind of done?
um, well, I already have a stack of projects that, it's like layers of an onion. As soon as the first, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs or something like that, right? You satisfy your hunger and then you could do philosophy, once you
Hmm.
have food in your belly, right? So, like, once I did that book, that was an edited collection, 26 chapters, 28 different authors because there were two pairs of two co-authors. But like that's on the topic of the philosophy of meditation. And my next project is my own monograph on the philosophy of meditation.
Oh, so you're
That's
working on now?
that's what I'm working on. That and after talking with John about my mystical experiences, I
Hmm.
thought I have to go back because like a long time ago I wrote them all down.
Wow.
Um, and so I found it, and it's in Word Perfect, which I don't have anymore. I only have Word. And so when I try to retrieve it in Word, all the symbols came where there was a
Oh
quote
yeah.
mark, now there's a big A, and so I'm going in and cleaning the whole thing up. And just as I'm loosely cleaning it up just to get rid of the technical issues, I'm reading parts of it and going, oh my God, this was really interesting. I have to rewrite this.
Oh yeah. I mean,
When I wrote it, it was pretty sloppy, and
yeah, mystical experiences. John recommended me a book that I'm working through right now on it's a Jungian who writes about alchemy, and I don't really care about the weird alchemy stuff, but the idea of like the mysticism, and he has kind of a three-layer model where um, kind of two of categories of mystical experience are very personal. It might be like kind of like the personal unconscious, the collective unconscious, but then like there's this like third category that's like between you and the world. It's not in you at all. It's this very weird category that's like, and it's fascinating. It is so fascinating. Again, that the brain could generate such profound, and it's like the way people remember, oh, I remember being really upset at that baseball game. Like there's so much content in a symbol. Uh, the same way like your wedding day is physically one day, but it's so much more meaningful, right? Like a symbolic experience has so much more meaning, and it's being communicated like in a non-analytical way, or I don't even know how to. I'm still like learning so much, but I find it just it's almost like an epiphany, right? The same way you'd say like, oh, I had an aha moment, and then I understood Archimedes' theory of buoyancy or something. But it's like, oh, I had an aha moment about the metaphysics of the trajectory of my life or something like that, or a relationship, right? Like Jungians would say like it's some kind of hinting at some relationship, or I don't even know. I'm probably saying too much, but I find it
oh, that's okay.
fascinating.
You're mentioning Jung. So when I was saying if you found a really good priest or a therapist, that makes all the difference in the world. Imagine if Jung was your therapist, that kind of thing. So like, there are people who go into these careers and it's just a kind of job for them. They had some skills, so they went that way, or for whatever reason they wind up like, not everybody who becomes a teacher does it because they love teaching and they're called to do it. They wound
Right.
up there because, I didn't know what to major in and this and that, and life turned out that way.
Mm,
Right. So similarly, there might be people in the priesthood, people who are teaching meditation or yoga or whatever, that, they're not there for the
yeah.
right reasons. And it's
Everything. Yeah.
yeah, but when you get the person who they embody it, they thrive on it, they live it, it's what gives their life, energy or fuel,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's different.
Well, and just like it's a whole to the West, we've only ever had this language in religion. And so it's a whole, it's not, I don't think it properly belongs in psychology. Maybe it belongs in philosophy, honestly. Like maybe the symbolic, more philosophers need to be thinking about how symbols work, because like religious people will always interpret it as, something cosmic or cosmological or something. But like, yeah, I don't know. It's so interesting. And then like, you've lived this stuff, and I can imagine quite well. I'm a pretty good visualizer, and I can kind of let my imagination start getting some momentum on its own just from picturing things. Or like we were talking earlier about like journaling or free writing, and there's some like it's a similar kind of symbolic opening of like, okay, well, what's going on here? What's lurking underneath this interplay between what's happening here? And then if people can make sense of it instead of making it into some kind of weird voodoo or some kind of weird um again, dogma is probably a good word. A lot of people criticize some of the like Christian mystics for being too symbolic, but like you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Where does the symbolism belong? What do you think? I don't know. This is a very horribly worded stream of
Yeah,
consciousness.
no, I'm not sure.
Do you think
I'm not.
philosophers should be wondering about this, or is it more like should priests, or whose domain is the symbolic?
Yeah. Um, this is a really good question. And what it makes me think about is people like John, right? John Vervaeke. He's a
Hmm.
cognitive scientist and a philosopher.
Hmm.
And he knows a lot about psychology. He's an interdisciplinary person. But
Mm.
cognitive science, the way he understands it, includes anything having to do with cognition, right? And linguistics, psychology, philosophy, you know, all sorts of different areas of human knowledge, information science, whatever, even just like
I like the
artificial
spectrum you're putting it
intelligence,
on. Yeah.
artificial intelligence, like so many different areas feed into John's understanding of symbols, right? So you're asking me who's got the right domain. But I think one of the things that John is saying, and I've heard him talk about this somewhere, is that this balkanization of knowledge is part of the problem, at least in academia, right? We've got these silos. Like we're just studying the words.
Mm.
We're just studying the mental states. We're just studying the neurons. We're just studying the logic. We're just studying,
Ooh.
you know what I
So there
mean?
needs to be a very like from all angles looking at symbolism or looking at mysticism,
Symbolism is
maybe.
such a complex issue.
Hmm.
I'm not sure I would want to stuff it into only psychology or only philosophy, um, or even like English teachers are pretty probably, you know, they live in a world of literature, the
Hmm.
imaginal, the imaginary, all that kind of stuff, worlds of meaning and poetry and all that. That's so different from psychology and philosophy in a way, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. No, it's
that's a universe of meaning.
yeah,
And
yeah.
symbolism is like themes in English. It's like such an
No,
abstract
this is the
thing.
mythological, right? Like we were talking about reductive physicalism. This is like a whole other ism that's being
Right.
forgotten about right
Exactly.
now.
When you first interviewed me, you asked me, what do you think about the differences between the nomological
Right. Yeah, yeah, the non-logical, the narrative and the normative. And I wanted to
narrative?
bring those up again today. Yeah.
What was the third one?
Nomological, normative, and narrative.
Normative. Yeah.
Hmm.
Nomological, normative, and narrative, right? So, like literature or English teachers are dealing with narrative, right? And symbols belong in the narrative domain, but they might also belong in the normative domain.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, that's
and
where it gets really interesting.
yeah, so like,
Well, maybe we could say they're transcategorical. Maybe in their nature, they're like so, maybe that's why they're so sticky or elusive because they can do normative functioning or they can do narrative functioning or even conceptual, right? They can break you out of a rut or or a lot of geniuses will have a very weird, like Feynman has a very weird, like almost symbolic pictures of his thinking before he did all of his theories and stuff. Maybe it's like trans categorical.
yeah, I mean, and in a kind of indirect, not so linear way, Plato's
Mm.
forms are somehow or another connected with symbols or could be connected with symbols.
What are the forms? I've been asked John about that. And I don't quite understand, and I haven't
Yeah,
finished reading all Plato. So,
yeah, they're hard to understand and to put into words. Um,
but they're in the symbolic realm.
well, I no, maybe not. So, what I'm suggesting is like there are so many different levels or layers of understanding what symbols are. There may be a form of symbols or symbolhood or something like that, the essence
Hmm.
of a symbol,
Yeah.
right? A platonic form of a symbol, which would be a symbol of a symbol, like the form of a
Wow.
symbol, right? So, and like, it's like analytic philosophers will normally talk about Plato's forms as some kind of abstraction that gets at the essence of a thing. So it's kind of like, okay, to use the simple things from the Republic, where did you read the Republic?
Not a
Did
long time. I'm building up to it. Yeah, I'm not
okay,
quite.
yeah. Well, in the Republic, Plato maps out what he calls the line in the cave.
Oh, I know that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know the
Yeah,
Lion King. Son.
yeah. So the intelligible and the visible. The visible world is the world of physical objects and shadows and reflections and mirror images and paintings and all of that. And those
Hmm.
are less real than the items that they are instances of, which are in the world of intelligibility, the
Okay.
intelligible world, right? So let's say you have an actual drawing of a or triangular block, and then light bouncing off it creates a triangular shadow, right? And then someone takes a picture of that shadow, right? That's like, so the triangle is, it's an imperfect triangle. It instantiates triangularity, the property of being a triangle, which is timeless. It's an abstract object. It's not
Hmm.
physical. It exists in another way of existing other than a physical triangle
Right.
cut out
It's
of
not
wood.
one instance. It's beyond being any one
Yeah,
particular
all
instance.
triangles share in the form of triangularity. It's an abstract, it's almost like a universal, like just a
Hmm.
pure, like a concept, right? That's an initial way of talking about forms, but it's not enough. But like, so then a physical triangle is less real than the essence of triangle, the form of
Hmm.
it. Um, the shadow of the triangle is shaped like a triangle. That's less real than the physical one. And then the picture of the shadow is even less real, right? Because
Hmm.
it's a representation of an image, which is just kind of also, like cascading mirrors. When you stand in front of two mirrors and you goes off into.
Right, right, right. And like when you repeat the same idea, it gets broken down and degraded and
Yeah. But now, like Plato uses mathematical objects like triangles or whatever to make the initial understanding, like a concept or the universal of triangularity or squareness or whatever the geometrical figure
hmm.
is more abstract, timeless. It's got a truth to it, which never truth never changes. So right? That's the Parmenidean versus the Heraclitean, Heraclitus versus Parmenides. Being, reality, never changes because then it would have to come in and out of nothingness, but there is no such thing as nothingness.
This
Yeah.
is tricky. How we're in tricky space now.
And then Heraclitus says, no, everything's always changing. Look around you,
Hmm.
right? So for Heraclitus, the shadow and the physical triangle are more real than some abstract triangle. That's not real. This stuff we see is real. So it's senses versus reason,
Hmm.
right? The empiricists believe what the senses reveal. The rationalists believe what reason reveals. Parmenides a rationalist. Tries to combine them both and say,
Hmm.
okay, the empiricists in the physical world, the visible world, it's real, but it's less real than the higher realm.
Hmm.
You know, it's more like a heavenly place than this
Hmm.
physical world. There's that kind of matter spirit thing. But this world is not really fully intelligible. It's only partly intelligible because it's a reflection of the intelligible world of these pure ideas.
Hmm.
And but like the concept of a triangle is itself a reflection of this more abstract essence of triangularity,
Hmm.
or any really important concept like the virtues, like, or those transcendents, as John called transcendentals,
Hmm.
beauty, goodness, and truth, right? Or is it the good, the beautiful, and the true, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, those things are like the higher level forms, right? They're like perfect forms or something like that. It
Hmm.
gets mystical. Um, and then like the form of the good is like the mother of all the other forms in Plato. It's kind of weird, and and Plato says like through dialectic, right, through philosophical reasoning, your
Hmm.
mind is getting more proximate to the forms,
Mm.
right? You're immersing yourself in them when you contemplate them, you know, theory, that you get a kind of philosophical intuition, a kind of direct apprehension. That's enlightenment for Plato, where you
Hmm.
apprehend the forms, and those are like emanations from the good, which is the form of all forms.
Hmm.
And the Neoplatonists call that the one, and
Right.
then all the other forms are like the logo, nous, right? They're elements in the mind of God, so to speak.
Hmm.
You know, um, so it's like that like that's a very crude description of forms that you might get if you took your first class on Plato. In a traditional philosophy department,
Hmm.
right? John's Neoplatonist informed understanding of the forms
Hmm.
is so much more rich, and he's always trying to relate it to intelligibility, relevance realization,
Well, right. The
understanding.
intelligible idea makes it so much more interesting, right? The fact that it's not a, what would they say, like phantasm is a Greek word that they'll use, or like words that start with that kind of root. And I guess that would be a little, definitely not the same, but like similar to like the illusion in Buddhism, right? Like there's a lot
Yeah,
of,
appearances,
mhm.
phantasm, right? Well, um, I'm mixing up my Greek terms, but yeah, so like the world of appearances, that's Heraclitus's world, the
Mhm.
perceptual world, the visible world. And in Buddhism or even in Hinduism, it's Maya, which means illusion.
Right, right, yeah.
But in Buddhism, it's the conventional world, the world of phenomenal appearances. They're all empty of self. They're all
Mm.
ephemeral, and so I don't know if like I know that John has said that the Kyoto school is Neoplatonic in a way, where there's a great convergence, but I don't know enough about either Neoplatonism or the Kyoto school to be able to speak in the way John would speak if you said, John, spend 20 minutes explaining the forms to me.
Oh
He would
yeah.
do a much better job. And that's a question I'd love to ask him. And one of us should ask him that soon.
Maybe the three of us could sit down and talk about Neoplatonism and like what it means in 2022 or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That would be a great conversation.
Well, and they have that kind of double meaning in the Kyoto school where like a leaf means it's the fall is starting. So there's an event, but it has like a more of it means like an intelligible bigness. Like it's revealing a moreness of the world that's very intelligible.
Well,
Um,
that's the Buddhist idea of interdependence, right?
okay.
So yeah, like a leaf falling off a tree, it's turned brown, it falls off the tree. It implies everything else in the universe.
Right, right. Like that's a beautiful idea.
Yeah,
There's something really
yeah, that's
holistic about that. And it captures like the particular and the general at the same time, which is kind of cool.
yeah. But I confess to being philosophically puzzled by what the forms are for Plato. And John, I remember him saying that one of his first mystical experiences was a vision of the forms,
Mm,
but I don't think he described the vision much. I think he might have left it vague in that talk that I heard. I don't remember which one it was.
uh-huh.
But when I was having a lot of meditative, weird experiences, I hadn't read Plato yet. I hadn't read any really professional philosophy. It was prior, I was a teenager. It was before college. There was no Plato in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear the word forms. If you said forms to me, I might have thought of color forms or something. You know, those little plastic stickers that you put on things, color forms. Like
Okay.
forms would might make Jello molds, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I never heard of that. But I had this experience where it felt like the membrane separating my mind and body from the world vanished, and the physical objects in the world were a very thin veneer of reality, but what was much more present in my expanded, I was like kind of very vast kind of space that my awareness was spread out across or within.
Hmm.
It was like a almost like a gas expanded.
Hmm.
And what was in the space was all these holographic diamond like images, but they were less, they almost were like holographic images, but they were more subtle than that.
Hmm.
Each one was kind of like an idea. And each, when I say diamonds, it was because each idea had a kind of different aspects of it which constituted it, but which were, it was almost like here's a concept, it's like a diamond, and it's got all these facets, like a diamond facet, all the edges
Hmm.
of a diamond. And each one of them, like a hologram, was connected like by a beam of light, but it wasn't light, it was more subtle than light. It was
Hmm.
invisible yet detectable to another diamond. And they were all interconnected. It was like a vast field of these idea diamonds
Wow.
with these interconnections between them. And any one of them that I put my attention to, it was a kind of Gnostic, immediate intuition
Wow.
of what those ideas were. And they were things like about the world, about wisdom, about virtue, about all these important philosophical ideas about minds and souls and beings. And I could, it was like, it was almost like a, a, a holographic library of all knowledge.
Hmm.
And I felt omniscient in its in its presence. And any one of the threads that I went into, it was like, this is psychology, this is this is that. And I could see how it all hung together.
Wow.
Everything was interdependently intelligible.
Uh-huh.
Okay. That was my experience. And I had no words for it at the time. I'm become much more able to articulate that the more I
Yeah.
think about it over the years. And now that I've had more of an education in philosophy and in meditation and all this kind of stuff. But like, I remember coming out of that with, like, what did you say at the end of one of those circling weekends? Make people write for 10 minutes and come up with an affirmation.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't that I wrote and came up with an I came out of that with this imperative in my mind. And I don't know if that thing spoke to me or if it was like a revelation or just an insight that formed in my mind. But the word philosophy was in that. And it was like, I need to study philosophy just so that I can wrap my head more around that and try to explore that and explain that and bring that into this world.
Wow.
And
I feel like I'm in Back to the Future and just like the car just shut off and the flames are just riding behind the car and it's gone.
then by accident, I don't know, accident is the right word, but like unintentionally, I took my first philosophy class in college. I loved it. And the teacher said to me before the semester was even halfway over, "You're a natural philosopher. And you're also very intelligent. And I'm going to put you in our scholars program." It was at Lehman College, the Lehman Scholars Program. It's like an honors program, and you belong in there. In smaller classes, we have seminars, and we'll
Yeah,
spend
yeah.
the whole semester just reading one book, this kind of thing, and talking about it every day. And that's where you belong. I said, oh, okay. And so, and he put me in the program, and then the next semester, he was teaching um, a seminar in the Lehman Scholars Program on Plato's Republic. So that class, I think it was in the spring, so I had the summer off, and but I knew that I was going to take that class in the fall. So I went out and got the book. I said, let me at least read it once over the summer, and I read Plato's Republic. And when I read about the forms, Plato's description, I thought that's what I saw. I saw Plato's forms. And that was what I was like, oh my God, that's what I saw. Now, the language for it is still like vague, experimental, brainstorming, feeling my playing with words to try to capture it, right? And that's why, like, but then, like, when teachers teach about Plato's forms, they talk more about like the way I described it to you like 10 minutes ago. You know what I mean? There's these concepts, and there's something more abstract than a concept, and you can only intuit it after you've done this kind of geometrical abstraction and da, 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 da. But the way that teachers talk about it, which is the way I talked about it 10 minutes ago, sounds very different from that mystical experience that I had.
Right. Of
Very different.
course. Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
because
yeah, and I don't like, I'm still exploring this stuff and don't fully understand it. But like John seems to have a handle on what Plato's forms mean, and I'm just dying to figure out what that is because I
yeah,
have
I'll
these
send you
weird
another.
ideas about it myself. Which when I briefly described that experience to him, very brief, not with less detail than I gave
No, no,
you.
yeah, yeah, I've heard this is way more
Yeah,
detailed than that.
yeah, and he was like, "Oh,
I
right."
remember that. No, no, me and my friend were like, wow, because I like pretty much everything John talks about, but I also just like him and seeing him light up in that moment. Like I remember it, and even on the circling weekend, I could tell a couple of times when like he was getting excited or when he was doing different things, and maybe you did too. You're nodding and agreeing and things like that, and
Great. I love that weekend. It was so great.
yeah, yeah, we should start talking about Neoplatonism more often, Rick, and just we could meditate for 20 minutes or go through those 5 levels that he taught that weekend, or um, but it's kind of it's more than Stoicism or Epicureanism, and it's really like I don't know, it's much closer to what Socrates was talking about. Like I love this idea that Plato was like an artist philosopher who was using analogy and literary conventions to kind of build a world that could portray what you're talking about. Like the I was talking to someone else about just like the lost artistry of philosophy, and that it used to be normal the way we think of religion and religious art. There's no philosophical art, um, but like what you're saying is like there's these things that are almost impossible. Like it took you a lifetime to be able to say that really beautiful thing you just said, but like allegory and story, and especially when someone values the intellect the way Plato did and the way Plotinus does, and they it gets kind of a backseat to faith a lot of times in religious places. But yeah, I just find it's like a lost treasure. And even Jung, to kind of keep it really onto the symbolic, he was shocked when he was looking at people's dreams. They kept seeing the same thing, and he's like, what is going on? Why are all people, even people on different continents, even people we claim are different breeds and species, and all this European kind of colonial languages snuck into their thinking, and
Yeah.
um it's super interesting. Yeah, I'm almost speechless. I'm just like it's so fascinating.
Yeah, it certainly is. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun talking to you about this stuff.
Well, good. Yeah, and I feel like I hope that you think of me as like a friend. I hope you don't think
I
of me
do.
as okay.
I do, and that's why. And I forgot to get back to you. At one point, I said, "Oh, I'll answer that," but then when I'm done, I want to ask you what you think about that. But I don't remember what the topic was. But it doesn't matter. But the sentiment there was, I get as much out of talking to you as you get out of talking to me.
Well, that's
And
great.
so I know that like you approach this as part of an effort to get data for a documentary, and I'm one of the people from John's show and all of that. But the exchange between us is equally valuable to me.
Well,
You
good.
know.
Yeah. And
Yeah, I was happy to see your face
oh yeah, yeah.
over the
Likewise.
weekend. I was hoping I'd wind up in one of the rooms with you, but I didn't.
Well, maybe we could do that. Do you want to practice with like Daniel or Thomas or some of my other friends, and we could try to do a Dialogos or a fellowship in
Yeah,
a couple of weeks, or when you're not
absolutely.
busy? I think out of all of us, you're the busiest. So just I don't want to ever start to
Yeah,
impose on your.
couple of weeks might work. In the next week or two, I'm pretty busy because classes are starting up around March 5th or something like that, and I have to gear up for them and
Yeah, yeah, of course.
some other things going on right now. I handed the book, the proofs in, but within another day or so, I'm supposed to get back the index that they created. This is a 400 and something page book with 28 different authors. So there's going to be a really big index thing that I have to check and make sure they've got, enough, not too specific, not too, not missing important terms. Make sure the page numbers are right. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, yeah.
That and starting new courses and 9 million other things that I've got going on. I literally have about 10 open things on my desktop that have been open for weeks because I've got all these other. I'm writing
Working.
a paper about philosophical counseling. I've got another philosophical counselor who asked me to, read his paper and give him good feedback. I'm writing a book review that I was asked to write on one of my mentors, a book that he just wrote. I've got all these, and one of those open windows is like a PDF program, like Adobe or whatever it is. That itself has about a half a dozen things that I want to read. Two of them are Nishitani, and something about the
Well,
Neoplatonists.
let's make that a goal. We can read a book together or something. Like with Daniel and our friends, we're always reading books. Right now I'm reading Snobby. We're on like the third chapter, super dense, but we just kind of read a chapter a week and dive
That's
in. And
smart practice, yeah.
oh, it helps a lot. Yeah, we were just saying last week how
Oh yeah.
helpful it is for finishing
Oh yeah.
books.
When
And
I was in grad school, well, not just grad school, when I started writing my dissertation on free will, CUNY Grad Center, I took a book called the Oxford Handbook of Free Will, which was kind of like my handbook on meditation. It had like 20 some odd chapters from leading people that overviewed everything. And I created the free will circle. It was all very selfish just to help me.
no, that's
And
great. Yeah.
yeah, and I would photocopy the chapter, make a, we had like 6 people who were showing up, 2 professors, four students plus me. And I would put the chapter out by all the other chapters the professors would put out, and everybody, our members would read it and come
Yeah,
in
yeah.
next week and talk about it. So just having like a half a dozen other people
Mm,
read the same thing I read and then argue about it for 2 hours every week, we got through the whole book, and,
right.
and I wrote my dissertation. I mean, once I really put my mind to it and did that, I wrote my dissertation in less than a year. So I
It's
had
something
waste.
like Lectio when reading with groups. There's something like
Yeah,
it's more dynamic and fun and
yeah,
less.
it's yeah, absolutely. And that's that thing that John said, like about, with the rise of the printing press and everything else, like we don't read the same way we used to.
Oh my gosh, like you were talking about slowing down and thinking, like, if you're just looking for information from the internet and books, it's like psychological
Yeah,
fatigue.
yeah, yeah. You don't have time to enjoy what you're
Yeah,
reading.
yeah. The beauty of books is so, it's the best. I don't know. I'd like to write a book about books one day, and because it's how can you learn so quick or be in a new world? Or we didn't even talk about. I wanted to talk about like the perspectival knowing and the participatory knowing that was happening at that circling. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
We didn't
learned
talk
so
enough about
much.
the weekend. We only talked a little bit about the circling weekend, so
We
we
did at the
can
beginning
talk.
a lot though, and and yeah, or maybe yeah, we could definitely could have talked a lot more for sure. But
Yeah, that's okay. Next time, we'll see.
yeah. All right, Rick.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's been over 3 hours.
I
So
know.
time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, we'll definitely plan something again when you're less busy, and I'll let Daniel and everybody know that maybe you could circle with us or do a fellowship or
Oh yeah, that
um,
reminds me. I'm gonna have to look up the name in my notes from the weekend. But there was a fellow there, I forget what his name was, who emailed me right afterwards and asked me if I know of any groups that do their own little circling thing. And so I thought, let me ask you if we can pull him into one of the ones that
yeah, yeah, for sure. Huh.
he took the circling thing. I think he has like an Italian name and an Italian accent.
Did
I
you
don't know.
practice with him or he just reached out kind of
No, no, he
openly?
just reached out to me. I don't know why. Or maybe he said I saw you on the things with John or something like that. I
Uh-huh.
forget. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 definitely.
Right.
And
So yeah, yeah. I was like, well, I don't do it, but I'm about to start doing it with Robert, and I said I'll
exactly.
speak to him. So okay.
Yeah, we'll practice and just go through some virtues or go through, Plotinus and do a passage with the I love the fellowship. I like the dialectic and the dialogos a lot, that like fostering like almost like a sense of what a virtue could be like. But the fellowship I love too, like those texts and just participating what Buber was thinking about and
Yeah, that was a
um,
really good passage that they chose.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, it was awesome. Did your group like it was really cool?
Yeah, no, we enjoyed it. We didn't get far enough with
Mm.
that either, but it was okay. It was really good. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like chanting and philosophy and philosophia, like communitas, and yeah, there's it's so fun. I definitely could see people doing it too much and being indulgent, but something to do like twice a year or 4 times a year, like the way they did it, and it was so well run too. I think last time this is their second one. Last time they had even more staff interacting and like all the volunteers and the staff are so friendly and nice and yeah, go ahead. You look like you wanted to say something.
No, I was just gonna say it was absolutely great. I love that kind of work. I'd be happy to do any version of whatever we did there.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'll let everybody know and my friends, and definitely you can share the information with them. And
Yeah, I'll email you with his email once I find it.
all right, Rick. Well, thank you so much for talking, and
Yeah,
I just
thank you too. Like I said, I appreciate this just as much as you do.
awesome. Well, I'll
All
talk
right,
to you again
Robert.
soon.
Take care, man. Thanks.
You too.
Ciao.